Thank you. No, I hadn't heard. So it's significant. This is the first such meeting publicly announced since 2011. And that's generally because although Egypt and Israel have government-to-government relations are excellent, but people-to-people relations not so much so. So typically speaking, these meetings tend to be sort of quieter. In this particular case, though, Egypt is heavily involved, along with Jordan, in trying to revive the moribund Israeli-Palestinian talks. And I think the fact that this meeting is so public demonstrates a couple of things. One, I think Egypt's seriousness Egypt is attempting to show that it's taking this very, very seriously, and the Israelis at least are showing that they take Egypt's efforts seriously, but also you want to bear in mind that this concerted effort to try and get the peace talks back on track isn't just Egypt, Israel. Egypt and Jordan have drawn in Germany and France, and one way of signaling that this is, hopefully this not business as usual, is to try and make concerted public statements like this one.
So Israel and Egypt have been working together to contain Hamas, a blockade of Gaza from both sides. But Egypt also effectively acts as a mediator in many cases and is pushing its involvement as well. How does it manage to play both roles and maintain that relation with Hamas leaders?
So I think because you need to bear in mind that Egypt's wants, needs, and eventual purposes are very different from Israel's. Israel's attempt to contain Hamas are for its own reasons. In Egypt's case, Egypt is consistently worried about security issues on the border because there has been a flow of terrorists and armaments through the tunnels, which have now been closed, and therefore that blockade is generally speaking for security purposes. But Egypt is also very concerning. Egypt is an Arab country, and generally speaking, Arab populations are enormously empathetic with the Palestinians, and this is something that Egypt, as with every other Arab country, has to place sort of front and foremost at the top of its calculations. So the blockades are different. I mean, for example, Egypt will typically continuously open the Rafah borders for medical purposes, and generally when those borders close, it's because it's sending a signal to Hamas. It did that recently, where after Hamas had released a couple of rockets into Israel, the border was closed with no end date in sight. They reopened it less than 48 hours afterwards, but that was a signal to Hamas. So Egypt's security concerns are different from Israel's, and therefore that's how they managed to keep those issues slightly separate.
And briefly, if you can, does the U.S.'s potential suggestions of a waning interest in the region have any effect on Egypt's role in the region?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Does the U.S.'s suggestions of a waning interest in the region have any potential consequences for Egypt's position in the region?
So, okay, Egypt's position in the region, I think Egypt had always been a regional powerhouse, and that changed slightly after the 2011 revolution. It changed a lot. And Egypt's new policy, if you like, is it's not policy towards foreign affairs is not it isn't a scattershot policy. It's significantly more focused, and it tends to focus on issues that are directly relevant to its own domestic security, national security, and national development. The Israeli-Palestinian situation is of enormous interest and has a direct effect on Egypt's national security. And also you want to bear in mind that of the people involved, of people who can bring something to the table, Egypt is one of the very, very, very few partners that has good credit and influence with both sides, and therefore its influence is quite serious. I mean, when it pulled off the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel in May, I think it was the only person who could pull it off. So, whereas waning U.S. interest is problematic, it's not going to be the be-all and end-all in this particular case because people have other concerns.